Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for our free webinar, How to Use an Alchemical Approach to Deepen Levels of Transformation in Your Practice, featuring Leta Herman. My name is Jeff Bloom, Education Marketing Coordinator here at LASA OMS. For over 40 years, LASA OMS has been striving to promote the growth of the acupuncture industry by providing quality products, great prices, and the best customer service, as well as supporting the many schools and continuing education efforts available. With our free webinars, we intend to provide free educational opportunities taught by some of our industry's renowned practitioners and educators. I would like to take a moment to acclimate you to the webinar room. We recommend viewing the webinar in either Safari, Firefox, or Chrome, as you may experience slowness in other browsers. To the right of the video screen, you will see 3 tabs: Chat, Questions, and Polls. To chat with other attendees or to communicate any technical difficulties, please use the Chat tab. And for questions for the guest speaker, please use the Questions tab. We'll make sure that we get to those at the end of the lecture. Please note that each webinar is recorded, and immediately following the conclusion, you will receive an email with a link to view the video on demand. And we will also share the recording with the slides and any other complimentary material in the following week or 2 on our blog. You may always visit our blog and use the free webinar tag to all of our previously recorded events. From sports acupuncture to CBD to practice management, you will find something interesting for every practitioner on the LASA OMS blog. Now for our featured speaker. We are proud to introduce Leta Herman. Leta is a Chinese medicine instructor and practitioner, co-founder of the Alchemy Healing Center, author, presenter, speaker, and podcast co-host of the Inspired Action podcast. She is a longtime student of Master Jeffrey Yuan and offers a wide range of alchemy treatments and workshops based on principles of classical Chinese medicine and the 5 elements at her clinic in Massachusetts and in her travels throughout the world. Please join me in welcoming Leta Herman.
Thank you, Jeff. It's so exciting to be here. We were just talking about how we did this a few years ago and how much it's grown since we first started. So I welcome everyone. It's great to see you. I noticed a lot of people that I recognize your names, and I've worked with you before, so I'm glad you're here. And many of you I don't know, so it'll be good to get introduced to you. So thank you for joining tonight. I wanted to just say I'm going to be moving fairly quickly, but we're going to save time at the end for questions. So I'm going to give you an introduction to alchemy. Some of you may not know very much about it, so I'm going to just really go over it. What is alchemy? Why you would practice it? And then we're going to have fun with talking about all different methods of alchemy and the most popular treatments and protocols, and some of the actual techniques and diagnostic considerations. So if you're already thinking about working with things like the ghost points, we're going to talk about that. So hang on till then if you're more familiar with these concepts, and you'll be very happy towards the end. So the goal for me today is not to have you start practicing alchemy as per se, if you're not doing it already. It's really an introduction so you can begin the study of alchemy, and I'll explain why. This, by the way, is a picture on a mountain in China that I went to at Jeffrey Yuan, and it's called Huashan, just a beautiful, beautiful mountain where the alchemists did a lot of their work. So alchemy takes time to learn before you begin working with others, because it's your journey and it's not a race. And for some of you, this might be the very beginning of that journey, practitioner. And for others, maybe you've already been doing it and it's just a chance to go deeper and look inside further. And alchemy is finding and challenging yourself to go deeper, what I call into the void. So we're going to talk about that later. So what characterizes alchemical healing is, number one, most important, that you are 100% focused on the perfection of the client. And as healers, we often focus on the illness or the challenges that person has. And I like to say that people are born perfect. And so alchemy is really recognizing perfection. So we have a book coming out soon called Born Perfect because of this concept. Everyone that comes into my clinic, I'm asking myself, why are they really here? Are they coming for their tennis ball, or are they really here for alchemy? And if that's the case, they usually are talking about how they want more out of life than what they're getting out of it. Like, isn't there more to life than this? And so that's the concept behind alchemical healing. Just a little review of I know you got an intro from Jeff, but I started working more with shamanic healing and plant spirit medicine. I studied with Elliot Cohen. And then I went very intensively into the 5-element tradition, where I learned possession work and then discovered the 13 ghost points, which led me to Master Jeffrey Yuen. If you don't know him, he's an 88th generation Taoist priest. Amazing, amazing person. And so I studied extensively with him ever since, doing his advanced acupuncture program, traveling all over the world, including China, on numerous trips. So I've been doing this for 20 years. And what I offer as a teacher is a very practical perspective, kind of a synthesis of all of these theories, and just being in my clinic for hours and hours of alchemical practice for the past 20 years. So that's how I put it all together. So as Jeff mentioned, I have an Alchemy Healing Center in Northampton. I also have a year-long Master Alchemy program for people who are really into it. And the podcast that we do is an Alchemy podcast. It also emphasizes the 5 elements and the 9 palaces. And I have a couple books: Energy of Love, Connecting Your Circle, the Big Little Gua Sha book, and online courses. I see a number of our students here today. And we're also publishing books. We have a book by Dr. Mary Ryan on Tibetan medicine that I recommend for you to check out. It's called Healing Anxiety. It's a fantastic book. So that's just a little bit about me. I love this quote from Claude Lars and Elizabeth Rachel de la Vallée, and I thought it was a great start today. You know, you must first have a deep understanding of your own life before pretending to know life in another, especially the disturbances in the development of life in another. We're going to be talking a lot today about possession and things like that. And I believe that there's a fundamental way every human being knows when another human being is in their true chi, their true essence. And when they have shui chi, or evil chi, or perverse chi, whatever you want to call it, we know that, but we don't know we know that unless we're trained. Of course, many of the acupuncturists are. So I really like this as a starting place, that we all have this innate knowing. And in alchemy, we're going to really be working with that. The other thing is to think, if you're a helper, and a lot of healers, we're helpers, we want to be helpers. This isn't about helping anyone. It's not nursing. It's not mothering. It's facilitating. It's being a witness. It's like being a crossing guard at someone else's crossroad. So not a helper. And really, you do alchemy for your own journey, to all yourself, not to help others. So it's your journey, and you're on that journey, and you will change, you will transform, you will transmute as much as the clients. So that's what alchemy is about. So you cannot work with clients who are further along on the alchemical path than you are. You're the patient and they're the patient. So you move along on your journey as well with them. You enter the void, we're going to talk about that, with no desire, no agenda, no expecting anything or any outcome. So what is alchemy exactly? Some of you may be wanting to know. The first thing to think about is, we think alchemy is changing base metal into gold, but the Taoists believe that we human beings are like gold, a metal that never corrodes or breaks down. I mean, think about it. If you dig up gold from the ground, it's going to be just as beautiful as the day it was buried, maybe thousands of years ago. So we humans are the gold. We just don't know it. So alchemy, it's an exploration of the mystery of life, of dimensions, of all things that are and that are not. Transformation is the key here. The word alchemy is used to mean many things, like I said, turning base metal into gold. And the Chinese alchemists, they believed were like gold. So if you think about the other metals, the base metals, even silver, they would disintegrate. So as society, most people believe that we are growing older and decrepit, and then we're going to die. And the Chinese masters actually believed you could become physically immortal, just like gold. So it's about never needing to break down or decompose. So this idea of the elderly, of growing older, is very much Benjamin buttoning it, I call it. So you're growing younger almost when you're doing alchemy. So alchemy helps release the baggage of this lifetime. That's one of the very important first steps. And any past life stuff or ancestral things that you bring to this lifetime, because we want to free you up, be your authentic self. This is why I've combined a lot of alchemy with ideas of the 5 elements and the 9 palaces, because you need to understand who you truly are, who your authentic self is, in order to free that up. The next thing that alchemy does is it releases the habits of your perception. It's like the blinders that we put on ourselves that limit how we interact with the world. So we have to be free from baggage and the limitation of our perception, our eyes, our ears, how we interact with the world is limited. And then we can truly fly in our lives. So my goal always is to help people fly in their lives. I say that a lot, which really means they're living their full potential. So again, alchemy is about freedom and living authentically. And there's more to life than our past sufferings. So it's letting go of that past that creates our freedom. The one thing about alchemy that a lot of people realize as they get started with it is it's really a journey of one. It feels like a lonely path, but you can take your friends with you. So it's nice to have a community of alchemists. And many of the famous alchemists that I'm going to talk about today, like Gahung, they created a community of people that they could do this with. But really, each person is on their soul journey. So it can feel a little lonely. Okay, so reasons to do alchemy. First of all, the basic clearing part of alchemy is that we want to get rid of any shui qi, which is evil qi. And so that could be goo or worms, possession by gui, which is ghosts. It could be chronic disease, even chronic Lyme. That alchemy could be a starting place of how you work with people. Autoimmune diseases, often I'm discovering more and more and more as I work with people how these deep emotional blocks affect so many people and cause autoimmune. All of this work is excellent for trauma. I would say that I have the bulk of my practice now is trauma related. And trauma, there's no hierarchy to it. It can be something that someone might think is not a big deal is a huge deal for someone, and something that another person would think is the most horrific thing that could possibly happen. And it's not as big a deal to that person as you think it should be. But you could have PTSD, any of those cases. And then there's the obsessive thinking. That is also a part of what we're talking about for alchemy. But most importantly, when you clear all that away, it's about your self-cultivation, your personal transformation, and your evolution. So all of this other stuff is just to get to that place where we can begin that work. The alchemical practitioner needs to be an alchemist themselves. So it's really about you practicing the self-awareness and self-cultivation. That's the first step. Do you want to transform and evolve your own life? And that's a question as a practitioner, if you're on this call today, that you can ask yourself. So self-discovery and self-cultivation is the reason to do alchemy in your practice. So normal human beings' lives aren't focused on self-cultivating. Many people just aren't. They're just focused on survival and trying to be happy with the external forces, not their internal. So I like to say they're like little boats on a sea being tossed this way and that way, and like, here comes the good stuff. Oh no, here comes the bad stuff. And so this is right, this is wrong. So they don't feel like they're in control. They're in a rudderless boat. They don't have a sail. They don't have any way to guide it. And an alchemist is someone who's going to have that rudder, have that sail, and be able to direct their little boat, or as Jeffrey Yuen used to say, course the wind. I love that phrase, coursing the wind. Now, the other thing that the 8 immortals have taught us, there are 8 of them, and they came from all walks of life. There was a woman, there were different types of people, older, younger, beautiful, not beautiful. So anyone can be an alchemist is the theme of that. So the question is, are you? And that's just a question to ask yourself. So you add a rudder and sail on that boat, and you become a master of your own life. So I say the alchemists were wizards. They were on a quest to become immortal because they thought, why die and become reborn again? Why not stick around for longer and master life? So whether it's just longevity, a very long life, or immortality is irrelevant. It's that you're in the state of immortality in yourself. You're not planning to die at 80 or 90 or 100. you're just like, I'm going to be here. I often say 600 years, so that just feels like a good number to me. So it's a different mindset. So why bother with alchemy? Without alchemy, we're often weighted down by our past so that we cannot be free to be ourselves. We also develop ways of interacting with the world that limit how we perceive what's happening. So that's that perception I was talking about. And if we're not self-cultivating, then we don't really have the desire to know more or do more or seek more. So alchemy just really generates a lot of that desire to be a seeker, I guess. So Gahung was one of the most famous alchemists, and on my visit to his mountain here, this is one of the cauldrons that I think he either used or it was a replica. But actually, there's a story behind it. One of his cauldrons was found in a cave that didn't have a hole big enough to fit the cauldron through. So like, how did it get there? But anyway, and he supposedly disappeared one day and left his clothes just lying there on the ground, like in a poof. So did he go to another dimension? What happened? But they said that was his death. But there's a graveyard, there's a monument to him and things like that. The other person we're going to talk about today is Sun Si Miao. And Sun Si Miao, this is his mountain. And you may notice that the yin-yang symbol is on its side. And that is the symbol of alchemy, just for anyone who doesn't know that. So some of the alchemists that I've been studying is Gahung. So with Jeffrey, we went on a trip where we went along his path in life to his mountain where he passed on to another dimension. And I always like to talk about the women who often get ignored. His wife, Bao Gu, was an amazing alchemist, and she was also an amazing herbalist and was known for her moxa. And she had moxa gardens all over the mountain that we visited. And I think Gahung is credited with being the inspiration for the female Nobel Peace Prize winner that recently won, I think 2 years ago, for her work with malaria. But I think it was actually Bao Gu's recipe that she might have been using because Gahung wrote it in his book. Sun Si Miao, we talked about, he is very famous for the 13 ghost points. And Ma Da-yang is another alchemist, and he created the starry sky treatment, which probably many acupuncturists know. And his wife, Sun Bu'er, is a really interesting mythological figure almost that you could check out if you're interested in. And then there are the 8 immortals. So there, like I said, there are many of them, but Lu Dongbin is my favorite alchemist. Let's see, I have a picture of her. There you go. Okay, so anyway, Lu Dongbin has great stories, and we talk about him a lot in our Master Alchemy program. Okay, so where to start? Because as a practitioner, you have to start with yourself. So the first step is learning your 5 elements. And if you haven't studied 5-element theory, check out some of our books and things like that. We're going to have an online class coming soon. And then also, it's about your 9 palaces. How do you interact with your life in terms of your career, your relationship, your home? All of these 9 palaces are very important. And it's about balancing that. And if they're way out of balance, it's going to be hard to do alchemy. So it's about bringing 9 palaces into balance. So if you pay attention to those things, you can become more sophisticated, and that's a good place to start alchemy. So first address the 5 elements and 9 palaces in your life. And as a practitioner, you can invent your own alchemy. I'm going to talk a lot about ways to do it, but if you understand the concepts, you can do your own. You can pick points, you can do Qigong. I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well, different ways to do it. So there's no one way to do it. There are many, many ways. And I'm just following a path of some ancient masters who can do their stuff, and I trust them, but doesn't mean that your way isn't better. So each person must find what works for them, what they enjoy, what brings them peace and passion. So alchemy is also stepping out of your normal life. It's not for someone who wants to fit in with everyone else. It's a little bit maybe stepping out of society. And I also say I like Eckhart Tolle's suggestion in The Power of Now of becoming a watcher of your own life. And that's part of the self-cultivation. Also, the process that I'm talking about is a very linear process, like a map that the alchemists left us. And all the stages can be repeated, or you can circle back, but there are these stages that I call the 9 stages of alchemy that I'm going to talk about. And they are not very time-based schedules, like we're going to do 1 year on this stage and 1 month on that stage. No, no, no. It's each person's own clock that's making you move forward. So it's a journey, not a race. So we're going to talk some more specific things now. So diagnosis requires the presence of spirits in you. The presence of the spirits is due to your inner connection into your own life. So that's, again, what I was talking about. You know, how do you know that someone has a gwei or a ghost? You know, it's about your own sophistication of your own spirits and understanding yourself, your self-cultivation. So the methods of alchemy that have been used for eons now, it started with stone medicine and elixirs, and that was something Gehung did a lot. And so they can be dangerous and unpredictable. So Sun Simiao came along and said, you know, let's not take maybe mercury and cinnabar and maybe dye. Like, that doesn't sound very a good method for alchemy. So he started saying, let's use acupoints or acupressure or acupuncture. Like, these are not, or even moxibustion. So these are not necessarily things that we need to ingest, but things that we can cultivate internally. So it's this concept of, for those of you who know the phrase neidong, which is inner alchemy, that was something that got developed. And there were many people doing qigong to do alchemy as well. In fact, the original intent of qigong was alchemical. And I think a lot of people who do qigong nowadays don't even know that. So practitioners must experience their own healing in order for the treatment to be successful. So when I do a treatment with someone, if I don't change, it's likely the client's not going to change. So as you're doing alchemy, you have huge realizations about yourself and the patient. You go through it together. Your happiness that your patient's improving shouldn't last longer than a day. But you know, it does bring a lot of joy to do that kind of work because you're both transforming. And I also like to have this attitude that I love. I borrow from Byron Katie, who the first time she heard the phrase namaste, she had someone saying namaste, namaste, and she heard no mistake, no mistake. So I decided to adopt this attitude in my work because sometimes people come back and they're thrown off and they're not feeling great. And then the next time they come back, everything's resolved. And so I've learned that with this work, we sometimes go through these changes and sometimes they're difficult. People even sometimes ask me to put their ghost back, and that's not possible. So, you know, that can happen and they have to work through that. So you got to trust as a practitioner in the moment that you're always making the right decision. And I think that's true no matter what healer you are. You're trying to trust the kind of divine presence in you doing the right thing. And as long as your ego isn't getting too much in the way, then you can move forward with that. That's true for any healing, not just alchemy. So another wonderful picture from China, but I already said that your happiness at your patient's improvement should not last longer than today. And that's that speaking to your own ego. So another question you can ask yourself, there's two actually here. The first one is, who are you? Are you more of a technician? You love the points, you love talking about them, you like to think about them. Or are you a teacher? Are you really wanting to teach that person what they need to know? Or the option is, are you a shaman? Are you a wizard? Are you stepping into the footsteps that are already there before you and just being? So that as a facilitator, you're not doing anything, you're just being. So that's a different perspective. So the shaman is really the alchemist in that case. And another way to say it is, are you the hero, saint, or alchemist? So the hero wants to save people, you know, kind of ride up on your horse, you know, in your shiny armor and save the day. And there are many of us who do that all the time or all the time. And then some people are a saint. They just want to teach people how to accept. You know, acceptance is the most important thing, and allowing. And that's wonderful. There's both of these, there's nothing wrong with them. An alchemist is in the middle. And so they're facilitating transformation, but when inspired. So sometimes they're accepting and sometimes they're being the hero, so to speak, if they're inspired. So many of you who've been practicing Chinese medicine especially know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about presence. Before you enter the room, you leave all your stuff at the door, all your expectations of the treatment. I learned this the hard way in the very beginning when I was trained. I kept saying, oh, I think the treatment's going to go like this. And then, oh, that was a bad idea. So it usually makes the treatment last a lot longer, and it's your gig, not the client's. So when I say treatments, I'm going to explain to you in a minute. I do 4 to 6 hour treatments at a time. So it's very important that you develop this presence. So the thing when you're doing these kinds of treatments is you become sensitive to space and time. You're literally watching the airflow in the room, the way the light might shift from the windows. You're hearing all the sounds, even the sirens on the street, and how is that interacting with what's happening with the client? And I play music as well. And I'm listening to the words and beat and everything in the music and how it's interacting with the treatment. And then I'm doing what's called entering the void, which is the void between heaven and earth, and meeting the spirit of that person, being in the moment with them. So I like to say it's like you're becoming a magician. You know, sometimes wacky things happen. Like I've had candles melt and just tip over. I've had rooms for no apparent reason turn freezing cold. Or very, very hot, and there's nothing wrong with the heating system. So all kinds of weird, wacky, wonderful things can happen. And so you're just participating in that when you're doing alchemy. So one of the things I also say is that your brain needs to kind of get sophisticated when you're doing alchemy. I run many tracks at once, and this took many years for me to develop. The person's talking, the music's playing, I'm listening to those words and the synchronicities. Sometimes the same exact words is coming out of the person's mouth that the music is playing. There's sounds in the room and outside, birds chirping. You know, I said sirens going by. So this is all what it is. So how do you do that? It takes a little bit of time. Let's put it that way. So let's talk. You're probably all wondering, what is she talking about? Because I haven't really given you much about the methods of how this is done. So I think of these treatments as a container for the alchemy. So there's several treatments that we're going to talk today. So as I said, alchemy often begins with like a cleansing or purging of the baggage of this lifetime and protecting against future reoccurrences of past. So a lot of people are protecting all the time that they don't want that bad thing to happen again. So the main treatments that I work with are the ghost points, which are unhooking a person from what makes them not free to be their authentic selves. So this is often the obsessive thinking, the trauma work, PTSD, anything where I think that there's some big emotional pattern going on that might be, for example, causing an autoimmune illness. Very good for goo or worms. So if someone has Lyme or any other kind of worm infestation, the ghost points are excellent for that. And that's the one that was developed by Sun Tzu Miao. And now the second one is I still really enjoy and love the Worsley traditions, IDs and EDs, which is not so much Jeffrey Yuen's tradition for those of you who don't know either. And they specifically are working with the Gui or the ghosts. And to work with the Gui, you really have to think of them as your patient because they're also beings that need care. So it's not about munching them up or casting them out, casting the demons out, really loving them. And so that's the IDs and EDs. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then there's a grieving treatment because sometimes people are stuck in grief. You probably have had patients who maybe have been 20 years stuck in grief. It's possible. And they need some help. And then there's a heart pains treatment. And that's for deep loneliness, maybe causing addictions, like a hole inside, you know, that where they're just trying to fill it. And then the starry sky points I mentioned before, Ma Da Young's starry sky points are very interesting points. They're much more physically focused, but the culmination of the starry sky points treatment is opening the chest to release emotions, but it has a lot of wonderful physical stuff to it. So after you clean the evil qi, the shui qi, and you put back into balance what has been out of balance in the person, then the person can begin self-cultivation. And this is really what alchemy is about. It's just you need to clear all that other crap to even get started with alchemy. So that's what I call the 9 stages of alchemy. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So how do you know if someone's ready for alchemy? Do they have a sincerity and willingness to change their life? And are they being centered in themselves to see their lives as being different? And are they willing to work? Or do they just want you to do the work? It's not a great scenario for alchemy. They really have to want to do their own work. So an hour is a very short time to completely change someone's life. Think about it. Like if someone has been possessed for 20 years and you're like, oh, I'll do an IDs treatment and get rid of your possession. Well, they're not going to let that go that quickly. So the issue of time is many practitioners try to do these treatments, even 13 ghost points. And I've seen many people doing 1 hour sessions. And I learned long ago that this isn't the best approach. Occasionally, I have to do it that way. That's just the only way that I can work with that person. But I try to see what really works for that person. And I really do a lot of these longer sessions. So the issue is the person's in the treatment room during the duration of that time. If you're doing them in 1 hour segments, which means a 13 ghost point treatment might extend out over months. Now, if the person's earth, they may be willing to and able to do that work in order to receive the self-realizations that earth people love. However, for most of us, we don't want that painful process. So if you don't know earth people love thought, and they love to just be interested in people, especially themselves. So they'll gladly do a treatment over a long period of time, then require a lot of self-reflection. And so I'm just saying that it doesn't work for everyone. So what I do is a protocol, many of these protocols in 4 to 6 hour sessions. And it's just basically a half a day. Sometimes they're longer, sometimes probably 4 is the shortest. So in my opinion, that's way more effective, because how can a person release something that's been there for many years? So even if all you get today out of this treatment is that, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about the fact that maybe I need to spend more time with people than an hour, even in an acupuncture session or something like that. So you can think about that. So how do you decide what treatment to do? So the diagnostic techniques are seeing if something's off with their basic humanness. Remember, I said that we all have the ability to see when someone's off. You can see it in their eyes. Is their spirit reflecting in their eyes? Do they have the brightness in their eyes? You can feel it in the pulses. We're going to talk about that. You can even feel if they're accessible to you. Sometimes you might put your hand on one's back and it's like there's nothing, there's no access. So that's a block. You can ask if they can access their own heart or assert their own will. And that may be an indicator that they need to clear something. And also, there are a couple different ways to think about possession. For those of you who are doing acupuncture, you're probably more familiar with talking about possession. If you haven't done that before, I'm making you make a big leap, perhaps. But ghosts or gwei can be a cause of possession, but also emotional disturbances can be the cause of possession. So there's no ghosts; they just have an emotional block, and that's a kind of possession. The Shen are the spirits of heaven, through which the influx of heaven comes to each person. So the gwei are spirits of earth. They're the supernatural forces connected with earth. So the gwei have to get home, and we have to make sure that a person's Shen is clear. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So let's go through this a little deeper. There's 3 treatments that we're talking about when someone has possession or evil qi or shui qi. So the IDs are called the internal dragons or internal devils. I actually prefer that word, internal devils. And that was the Worsley way of doing possession. And what that affects is the spirit that lives in the spleen called the yi. And the yi is your thought, your idea of yourself. So when a person doesn't have access to their own heart, they're not fully rooted in their spirit. So something can take over. And that means they get possessed. So they can't access their own heart. So I ask them, can you access your heart? And they go, I don't even know what you're talking about, but no, I can't. So they're stuck inside themselves and they can't undo it themselves. And so that's when a practitioner doing IDs can help. And some of people a lot of people who had really overbearing parents, just really oppressive situations growing up, then their will gets blocked. And a blocked will means they can't do what they want to do in their lives. They're just unable to manifest all these great ideas that they have. They have access to their hearts maybe, but they can't make it happen. And then the third thing is, I like to use the ghost points. The ghost points can be used for both of those earlier things. It's kind of a catch-all, but I would like to use them particularly for releasing cellular and emotional patterns in the subconscious and the unconscious. So they could even be good for curses, definitely for us of thinking, definitely for things that haunt people from their past. They're like hooked into it and it just doesn't let them go. They're a fish on a hook. So ghost points, you can actually do yourself if you're not possessed in terms of the first two scenarios, because you're not really stuck inside yourself. You're not like possessed by something. So if you're possessed, you can't undo it yourself, except in rare cases. But mostly you need a practitioner to help you if you're possessed. So the idea was these dragons would come and take away the possession. And the way I do it is I operate in this void between heaven and earth. And my heart needs to be empty and free in order to connect with that person's heart's void. So I'm going to explain that. I know I'm going really fast here. Write down your questions if you have any. So then there are some other treatments that I mentioned. These three are really just about an internal block in a person or an imbalance, but not really a possession. So the grieving, I explained, it's something that can happen to people who are grieving. They can't move on because they're not going through the natural process of grief. So there are these stages of grief and they get stuck in one of the stages. So an example would be the turning point for someone who's grieving, which can happen almost 9 months after the person dies, is they start to recognize the presence of that person that's gone in their lives again. They had to let them go and then they get them back. And that's a big turning point for people who are grieving. And some never get there. So that's a grieving treatment. The heart pains treatment is about the 9 heart pains. So it's following the heart channel and the pericardium channel in the body. And the spirit in the heart's accessible, but it's unable to be vulnerable due to an intense loneliness and an emptiness inside. And it's often the source of addictions. So I do that a lot with people who have addictions. And the starry sky points, as I explained before, are physical issues that's causing this lockdown in the chest. I don't do that treatment as much, but it's very intriguing and very helpful for certain people. I usually do it after I've already done those points. So for those of you who are new to the idea of a ghost or possession, what is gwei? What is a ghost? So traditionally, there are 3 types of ghosts: a hungry ghost, a romantic ghost, and a traveling ghost. So the hungry ghost wants to accumulate, the romantic ghost wants to stay with their loved one, and the traveling ghost is just hitching a ride to get to another place. So I don't really think about them that specifically. And again, at Shen are spirits of heaven, gwei are the spirits of earth. And so when you're working with gwei, as you get more and more sophisticated, you may actually have like a clairaudient conversation with your gwei that you're working with, and that is maybe possessing someone. And your job is to get them to go home. So a lot of people think possession's about power, like overpowering a gwei, and it's really not. It's about love. Because if you think about overpowering them, there will always be a gwei more powerful than you. It's not a great idea. So just something to think about if you're already doing that work. An emotional gwei is this idea that you become possessed by your own thoughts, like a worm in your mind, something that implants that thought into your head and you can't let it go. Or you implant that thought. And so long-term abuse can really cause this to happen most of the time. And 80% or more of possessions that I see are emotional. So it's a good idea to start, looking for that if you think someone's possessed. If possession's just way out of your realm of thinking, just think of it as phlegm. So in Chinese medicine, phlegm, when it's fully entrenched, it's like a gwei. It's just controlling you. And so if you don't believe in ghosts, just think of phlegm affecting the mind. Misting the heart, we call it. So it takes over the heart. It's like a gwei. And these treatments can be for clearing out the phlegm and blockages. So phlegm can make people go crazy when it mists the heart. So, sometimes you'll see all these odd behaviors, and ghost points are great for a psychological dysfunction of any type. And because phlegm with wind can cause a lot of volatility. So if you don't like the idea of a ghost, just think of phlegm. All right. So why do I keep talking about the void? So instead of trying to overpower something or ask the dragons to come in and munch something, what we do in the kind of alchemy that I'm doing is get into the void. So to access the void, you must first learn to go into the void of your own heart. This is number one first step that we have to learn as alchemical healers, is how do you access your own heart space? But, it's like the space where the blood flows through is where your spirits live, in your heart. And then you need to be able to access that. Once you go in the void of your heart, then you can access the void of the patient's heart. And from there, you can access the greater void, where you may possibly have some encounters with a gwei, if there is one. So you can think of your heart as the little spirit, the little shen, then your brain as the big shen, and then this greater void of everything between heaven and earth that we're accessing. So we're going to talk about a technique that you use when you're doing this. So I'm going to talk about non-needle and needle variations of this. So any kind of alchemical treatment is a vibrational technique. It's not lifting and thrusting. It's not circular. It's just vibrating. So if those of you are doing classical Chinese medicine, studying with Jeffrey, it's a little different than an 8-extra or a divergent vibrational technique, because when I do 8 extraordinary vessel treatments, I'm really thinking like the bottom of the ocean, just this like womp, 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 womp feeling, because you're really working deep with the yuan qi. So, in terms of 8 extra divergence, just put that aside. This is much more a shaking up, a very kind of faster vibrational technique, lighter and faster. So why vibrational? This is something you're working on that might be deeply entrenched in a deep pattern. So things are stuck. So it means you have to access that cellular pattern that's so entrenched and break it up. So we're asking all the habits that person has, all those cellular patterns, to begin to shift. So vibrations are subtly getting to it. And that's why one point can take an hour. I'm not kidding you. So, as you're working on that point, you're shaking something that's stuck on a very deep level. And so you can think about how that works with a needle or without a needle, depending on your kind of healing work. Now, the other technique I use is, a few of them, is I mentioned that I play music. I have 20,000 songs on an iPod that I shuffle, and I call it the Divine DJ. And in traditional treatments, I was able to witness several ceremonies in China where the monks were playing, cymbals and flutes and all kinds of instruments that I don't even know the names of. And the music could get really sweet, and wonderful and beautiful, and then very like cacophony of noises and cymbals and clinking, and it just flowed. And so what I have done with the idea of an iPod, and now Spotify or whatever you use, is that we're shuffling this music. So we're getting the simulation in whatever language too that we speak, in whatever location you are in the world. The music should be something that the person can relate to, I believe, instead of just playing Chinese music. Play the music of the person that is there. And so as that music evolves in the treatment evolves. And so it's really crazy miraculous. One of my best stories is this woman to me whose second child died a few days after birth. And she had a wonderful, amazing treatment, and butterflies were the symbol of this child to her. And they came to this bush outside the window, and she was just amazed. She was trying to get over the grief. And the big question was, should she have another child? And during the treatment, this song came on that I didn't even know was on my iPod. It was a children's song, and it was said, "Mommy and Daddy and Baby make 3. 3 is a magic number." So she said, "Does that I'm not supposed to have another child?" I said, "I don't know." Anyway, she came back the next day for her follow-up treatment, and I was using a different iPod with the same set of music. I pressed play, and the same song came on. "Mommy and Daddy and Baby make 3. 3 is a magic number." And we were just like blown away. So that's what I call the divine DJ, and it happens all the time. Right, so other techniques that we use in these sessions are paying attention, being aware. When is a point done? That's something that you feel inside yourself, or maybe hear or see if you're clairvoyant. So there's no rush to go through these points. Some people like to be very aware of the 4 directions. I've done some of this. I don't quite so much now that I've become sort of more advanced in that area. But traditionally, you can face south and stand in the north, because as you're facing south, you're activating your shin to get your guidance, and then you stand in the north, which represents wisdom. So that's just something, these are things you can think about. When a treatment stalls, then you have to figure out what to do. There's something that's not right, so you have to change things up. And I call that inserting yourself into the treatment. And it's very hard to know when to do that. And I often wait a long time before I do anything that inserts myself. My ego might get involved, and I think, oh, this is a good idea. So I have to really make sure. So when you're using needles, if you're an acupuncturist, the needle is just over the surface of the point. And when the point is done, the needle's thin without any effort. So they don't go in until they slip in. And then the point's done. So that's one way to know when a point is done. So just for people who use needles, the needles go straight in, not oblique, unless you're doing starry sky points. I think there might be a couple, but there's different indicators there. And you take time, like I said before, inserting. People don't say ow ever with these needles, because there's an opening that happens and they fall in. If you're doing 13 ghost points, it's difficult to do all the needles at once. There is a point, do 16 on the back of the head. So it's quite a feat to do all the needles at once. It requires propping the person up. It's probably the number one reason why acupuncturists don't do all the treatment in one session. And many people have said, oh, Jeffrey Yuen says to do them in hour breaks, but he also has said you can do them all at once, like I do it. Also, clients need a urinal. You can't just stop and pull all the needles out and then restart after they go to the bathroom. So it's complicated with needles. And also, when you're doing needling, you really do need to stand to do these treatments. So that can be standing sometimes for 6 hours and can be quite exhausting. So it's just something to think about. A lot of the acupuncturists that study with me, I teach them how to do the non-needle techniques. I do ask them to do 1 or 2 treatments at least so they can feel the difference. And then I teach them the non-needle technique because I think it's easier and better. So anyway, with non-needle technique, you're simulating the needling, and you think of yourself as being the needle. So your energy goes in as deep as it's needed. Your finger's not vibrating that much, but it's having a big impact deep inside. So the energy below is vibrating, and the finger might move so subtly the person doesn't even know it's vibrating, which is also true of the needles. And it's like a wave of energy that's to build. And the music's vibrational, and you can also do bilateral points at the same time, which is kind of cool. I'm going to go a little faster because we're going to run out of time. So at the end, there is a protocol for removing the needles, going backwards through. So you can do that with non-needle techniques. And it does really require that you be rigorous in the beginning, doing it as prescribed, as close as possible. I think of it as a container for you. And as you get more advanced, you can change things up. Okay. So, and the other thing I just wanted to say that all of these treatments, all these alchemical treatments, you can think about them as ritualistic treatments. It's about the color, about the light. It's about the smoke of the moxibustion. It's about, you could be walking the magic square, which is called the steps of you, which is used in a lot of Taoist traditions. Be music and chanting. There's a lot of things that you could bring into this. So when you do these treatments, you can't remember the points in the beginning. You're just into a weird space. So it becomes like a ritual. But right now, as I've been doing this for many years, I can do them in my sleep. But in the beginning, it's like, where am I? I'm lost. So in the beginning, you're just in that ritual. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more about the ghost points, since many people I think are here today to learn about the ghost points, Sun Si Miao created these 13 out of a bigger set that total were 20. These are all points you can look up online, like they're fully available to many people. Sun Si Miao was the king of medicine. He's in every temple. He's such a big deal in China. And it was reported that by the age of 20, he'd mastered and memorized all the medical classics, which was a huge feat. And when he died, it was reported that his body didn't decay for more than a month. So there's a lot of mythological stuff about him and Ge Heng, who I talked about earlier. So he didn't invent these points. He just put them together into an ode. And the ode of the 13 ghost points is what I do in these 4 to 6 hour treatments. He was Ge Heng's student. So Ge Heng was the one who did stone medicine, basically taking things like mercury, cinnabar, realgar, and he was doing that to do alchemy or to get rid of ghosts. And Sun Si Miao took that all and said, no, let's do this all internally or through acupoints. So let's just talk about the ghost points a little bit more. So the ghost points are like deciphering a code. You know, you discover the mystery that lies underneath. So I can tell you what a ghost point is about, but until you start practicing it, you don't really get it. It's like the name is a good hint, but from there, you're going to learn it yourself. So many people don't do the ghost points like I do. They just do 1 point or maybe a trinity of points or 2 points. So that's up to you. And in the beginning, that might be all you want to do, 1 point or 2 points or 3 points at a time. But the points are your teacher. So you develop your own relationship with each point. It's almost like when you're working with herbs, you have to develop that deep relationship with the herb or a point, but this is like really a deep relationship with a point. So you're transforming as you do each of these points. When I do ghost hidden, for example, and I'm working with someone's guilt and shame, and I'm starting to understand what is it like to be innocent, truly innocent, like a baby again. That's the level of teaching that these points can give you, and that you could feel that. And you're trying to help the person feel that. So you learn much by being present with someone else's transformation. And then as you go through the 13 ghost points, some points are more stuck on different people. So you start to learn, oh, this person doesn't have an issue with that, but this other person, that's the big one for them. So I just did one with someone who's got stage 4, cancer, working through it. And I went through the whole treatment, and she didn't have that many of the more advanced points. The ones at the end are for the really, really traumatic things. I went back pericardium 7 because as I did that point, there was so much about relationships and people in her life. And I just, at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and work on this point some more. And more stuff came out. And, I learned about more dynamics in her family. And so that was her point, out of the 13. And she didn't have a lot of trauma in her life, that she reported. So you're probably wondering about more stories like that. So, first of all, there's no right or wrong way to do a treatment. I sometimes can pick a single point with a person, and it's life-changing. I had a woman who I did this point called Ghost Market, and her whole entire life changed after that 1 point, which took me about 20 minutes. So she came back a year later and told me all these stories about her, how her entire life changed. So that's just something that you can do. And, one trauma may have affected just 1 point like that, but it's more likely that all of them are affected, or a big bunch of them. So the important thing is to figure out which points. And if there's not a huge trauma, I can sometimes listen to the stories of the person and go, that's kind of sounds like it's all about oppression, being oppressed. And there's a point for that. So that's a way that you can work with them. the story about that one is that a guy came to me with golfer's elbow, and I worked for a year with him, and I kept saying, is there anything emotional going on that might have related to this? And he'd say, no, just gua sha it. Just work on it. And then finally I said, well, can we just try some emotional? And he was like, okay, sure. So I did the ghost points. And when I got to large intestine 11, what came out was that he was in a huge legal battle, and this legal battle was all consuming, and he didn't think of it as emotional, but obviously it was. And when I did large intestinal as a ghost point, even though I've been working on that a lot, but as a ghost point, the pain went away and never came back. It's been like 10 years, so it's not come back. So that's the amazingness of the ghost points. Just so you know, after I do a 4 to 6 hour treatment, I'm rocking a person's world. So the next day or as soon as possible, I have to come back in, and I just treat the true essence of them. I like to use the 5 elements to do that, but you can do that in your own way, however you do that. But I'm really saying be you, be you, be you, because they've probably been not themselves for a long time. So it's like, how do we connect them back up with the divine? So that's sort of the focus of the follow-up treatment. So I thought we'd just go over some key ghost points that you could explore. You do a single point, like I said. You can use these techniques like vibration and music. And often I tell the person the heart needs to speak. So as they're doing the point, if someone's a chatterbox, I tell them to be quiet and see what arises. And if they're maybe not one to share much, I tell them, look, if something comes up, the heart needs to speak. It'll help the treatment. So I kind of start a dialogue with them. So how did you change the way you interfaced with the world would be a question to ask them, because we're going to talk about one that's the door to them. How do they speak about themselves and the world? That's another point that is very important that we're going to talk about. And for example, have they felt oppressed? And maybe they were in abusive relationships. So these are things that we can talk about. So these are the 3 points I'm suggesting you could start off with and look at in your practice if you're new to this. So Ghost Palace is due 26, and I call it the door to your palace. When you think about how we breathe and we eat, and so it's really about this interface with the world. And so after a trauma, what happens to that person? Their door operates differently. Maybe their door was wide open, and now they just want to keep it shut and locked up all the time. That would be an example of how the door might change. And so we're trying to get them back to their true essence, their true chi, by doing the ghost points. Another one is Ren 24, how the person speaks about themselves in the world. And we want not just the truth, and so not to self-deprecate themselves and just talk badly about themselves, but also not be a braggart and just, try to push people into believing certain things. The goal of this is, how do you get your gifts to the right people? Through how do you talk about it? So a person can get their gifts to the right person when their market point is clear. So if you think about how often we say things, we're like, why did I say that? Like I talk them out, or I often say, if you're selling apples at the market, do you say, come buy my apples, they're full of worms? But, maybe you could say, they're so tasty, even a couple worms like them, if they really are that wormy. But, it's like getting them to the right people. And then another point would be the one I mentioned on the elbow, which is ghost official. And if someone has been oppressed, like this man felt oppressed by this justice system, and so could be a point that you could work on for that. So those are just like some ideas. And like I said, all these points are out there, and it's not like a mystery what they are. It's just really about how are you going to examine them and operate as a practitioner with them in a deep way. So what do you tell the client about these things? Because you kind of have to go with whatever the client's frame of reference is. But I often say changes take place right away, but it takes 3 to 6 months for your habits to change. So they expect, everything to change immediately. And it often takes some time for the habits that they have that are based on these points to fall away. So I've even had people come to me and say that they suddenly stopped smoking 2 months after the treatment when we weren't even working on that. We weren't even talking about it. They just sort of like, I don't need to smoke anymore. I don't know why. So that would be an example where the smoking was a habit that they had based on a ghost and, some hook in them. And I just wanted to say that I tell them that the follow-up sessions are critical. In fact, I charge the whole treatment as a set, meaning the follow-up treatments included. Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up soon because I want to give you time for questions, but I just want to briefly tell you what the 9 stages of alchemy are, because I think that's the more exciting work than the ghost points. So Ge called each stage an elixir. So he was making something in his cauldron to drink and to engage in sort of stone medicine. But there are ways to do this through points and through meditations. And the idea is that your spirit, your Shen, has 9 transformations in your lifetime. And no one knows exactly what the 9 transformations are or agrees to what they are. But it's like we have 9 lifetimes, 9 incarnations and curriculum. So the emperor used to have 9 alchemical representations of his empire. So he had 9 dragons on his robe and like the symbol 9 everywhere. Even I think on the palace knockers. I'm not sure if it's 9 or 11, but I think it's 9. And the transformation of the person into the full potential who they are is why we do the 9 stages of alchemy. So just to give you a summary of them, the first 3 are about clearing away, kind of like what the ghost points do. And the second 3 are the most fun. They're about expanding your horizons and your perceptions and really reaching your full potential in life. The last 3 are where where life defies limitations. So, like for example, the limitation of gravity. People were reported to be able to fly from mountaintop to mountaintop. They were also supposedly be able to transport themselves through time and space. These immortals. So they could morph their bodies. That's how Ge fit into that small, tiny hole in a cave. They could become invisible, and time travel. So that's the high level of these 9 stages of alchemy. And I don't really care whether the person is levitating off my table, be nice, but I'm really trying to get them to fly in their life, metaphorically at least. So that's sort of a summary of some of the highlights of all of this. And I just wanted to give you my email. We're going to send out an email to you after the webinar so you get this information. I am doing an Intro to Alchemy workshop on November 16th, which will be live streamed as well as in person in Northampton, Massachusetts. And so you can look at that. I have a special LASA discount for people. So we're going to give you a link to that. And if you're interested in the Master Alchemy program, we have a link for that too. So that's it for, I think that's the last slide. Yes. So I wanted to save time for people to ask questions.
Hi, Leta, I'm back. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
You're so welcome.
So we actually have a bunch of questions here. So if you are ready, we can get started.
I'm ready.
All right. So Brian started off pretty early on. Wants to know, how do you think astrology can best interface with classical Chinese medicine in the practice of healing Shen issues?
That's a great question. And I am not very, unfortunately, well versed in astrology, especially Chinese astrology, but it is a big part of it. And in the starry sky points, they are all about sort of a cosmological treatment. So I study it through these alchemical treatments. And in stage 6 of alchemy, you're actually working on points that represent the Big Dipper. And when the alchemists flew, they would twirl. So it's like setting the Big Dipper as a top spinning, and that's sort of a visual. But in terms of answering your question, I'm not the best person to ask that. There are, people who really are versed in that, and it is definitely something that classical Chinese medicine takes into account in a big way. And, you can look at the Harari points and, points that are related to time, and you can, there's many, many ways to take that into your practice if that's something you're interested in. It's just not been a big interest for me.
All right. And then Charlie would like to know, when you say some want their ghost back, is who ghost possession or their patient spirit?
Can you repeat that? I lost you there for a second.
Okay. Oops, sorry. So when you say some want their ghost back, is this in reference to ghost possession or the patient's spirit?
Very rare, but occasionally when a person is possessed by a ghost, a real, like an entity, they miss them. In fact, if they've had it since they were tiny, they might be a painter and they no longer can paint. That would be an extreme example. I haven't personally seen that, but I have heard that can be true. So you could see why someone would say, I want my ghost back. And there's really, once you've taken that ghost home, back to the light or however you're going to do the treatment, you can't call it back. So that's something that you might want to explain to someone if they have that reference that people don't know they're possessed by an entity. So I don't need to explain that to them. But if they really do know that, then you may need to talk to them about that before they go through the treatment. Usually I believe that they're not in my office unless they really truly want it to go.
All right. And then Melanie wants to know, are ghosts often ancestors?
In my experience, no, not hardly at all. But I have seen some strange treatments that have to do with ancestors that are more like curses on a family. So that would be a kind of possession, essentially. But there are also romantic ghosts. So I see a lot of this where a ghost is staying like an angel. And there have been rare cases where I've been like, all right, you're doing your thing. You're not harming anyone. Maybe you just need to stick around for a while. And they eventually go. And then in other cases, it's really clear that they're not supposed to be there, even though they love their loved ones so much. And so they need to go back to the light, or, that's how I usually do it.
Right. And then Angel would like to know, how does one access their heart if they are born without heart element according to natal chart?
We all have a heart. So, and we have all 5 elements, 5 spirits. So that is really never a problem. Everyone has access to their heart. Yeah. So if you feel that you don't have access to your heart, it's more likely that you don't have access to your heart because something's blocking it. And it could have been from birth. That can happen, but it's not because of the chart.
Right. And then Star would like to know, what method do you use to clear your void?
That is a great question. First of all, the best protection is no protection. A lot of people are probably going to ask a lot of questions about how do you protect yourself. And this is why your self-cultivation is so important, especially if you're going to be working with Gwei, because you really need to be so embodied in yourself to do this work. And so the first step is to, examine, are you that kind of person? And it's really like a self-love. And, if your chi is fully embodied in you, there's no room for another entity's chi. So wait, what was the question again? I got on a sidetrack.
Well, it was what is the method that you use to clear your void?
Right. Okay. But there are times when I pick up some negative energy. So after every day of work, I just make sure that I'm clear. And so I might, for example, I still follow a lot of the Worsley tradition. I clear my own aggressive energy, which I call chaotic energy. Make sure I'm clear there. I am just very fortunate that I'm not a person who's ever been possessed, and I don't intend to ever be possessed. So I don't really have to clear that kind of thing. But even if I'm working with someone who, has some deep negative stuff and I'm doing ghost points, at the end of that, I might need to clear myself. And I would do that more from maybe not points in that case, but just really like being by myself, meditating, doing my light work to make sure that all that gets cleared out of me. especially if you ever like are afraid of something that person has, like that illness kind of like weirds you out and you're like, oh shit, am I going to get that? That's like the worst place to be in as a healer. So that rarely happens to me these days. And if it does, really spend some time just giving myself love and just like really feeling the deep health of my body and just, really manifesting my perfect health. So that can happen a lot with healers. So it's a good question.
All right. Next question. How much do you charge for a 4 to 6 hour technique?
I don't really want to talk too much about pricing,
okay.
but we
Okay.
it depends on how well, it doesn't depend. I probably shouldn't do that. It's in flux right now where our prices are going up. So.
Okay. All right.
But just for how about this? For your reference, if you're starting out, you might want to charge quite a bit. Like I say, how much is my time for that whole day? I do not do any other treatments on that day. That's how much I charge. So think about that. How much do you charge if you see X number of people in a given day? So, when other people that work with me, maybe they start with 500, maybe they start with 750, maybe they start with $1,000. And that seems like a lot of money to a person. But if you're doing a life-changing event, it's a good thing to do. So as you're starting out, you can think more along those lines.
Right. And then next question is from Elise, and she would like to know what happens if someone becomes more unraveled with the treatment, or if they have issues arise after the treatment that may affect their emotional stability.
Well, that's the no mistake, and it can happen. And I am completely there for them, and that's why I do a follow-up session. And actually, one of the reasons that I'm changing my pricing schedule is that I want to add a 3-month follow-up, because I have noticed that people do need to reconnect if they aren't a regular client. And so I have people traveling from all over the world to come for these treatments. So I would like to reconnect with them again in about 3 months, because I want to make sure that that's not happening. And some people just go away after a long session and do their thing, and that's fine. And some people are there with me. Now, if they're struggling, they usually do come back, and I work with them on a daily basis. And I might do a second treatment, long session in it for example, the heart pains treatment would be a good follow-up to the goings. So yeah, I've got people who have such severe trauma. One treatment is not enough. So I treat them maybe weekly, and then maybe I do several long sessions.
All right. And then looks like April would like to know any recommended techniques to protect the provider from evil chi and extra spirits.
I think I answered that question. For me, I really like to make sure that I am really good in myself, and sort of my true chi has filled me. But I will say that it's something to really think about. My classic example is a practitioner that I know was in a possession treatment in her house. And she was kind of new at it. So she was using the dragons idea, the Worsley idea. And instead of that entity leaving, it found another host in the house, which was her roommate. So I got this frantic call from her saying, oh my God, my roommate's gone crazy. What do I do? She's in the hospital and they can't figure out what's with her. So I went into the psych ward and I worked with this woman who was completely like pulling her clothes off, talking nonsense, pulling stuff off the walls, under 24-hour surveillance. And it took me all day to clear it, but it did clear. And then it's a great story. I was running the music, and the song Mrs. Robinson came on. Here's to you, Mrs. Robinson, that song. And I didn't know it, but her last name was Robinson. And she looked at me and she goes, I'm Mrs. Robinson. And I said, oh, you are? And she said, yes. And she's like, and then from that moment on, everything stopped. It just left. Whatever was left. She got out of the hospital and went back to her life. And now she was someone who had been, having a lot of alcoholism and things like that, very depressed. So she was a target. So, if you're worried about that, you can really examine whether you are in a good place in your life. If you're depressed and you're struggling on a deep level, this is not the best work for you to do. First, do your own work, your own alchemy, and then you can get to the place where you can do this work.
Then I'm not sure if this was also touched on in that answer, but someone also wants to know about clearing your own aggressive energy.
Well, that's interesting. We're having a workshop on that topic on November 17th, which is a Sunday. It's an afternoon workshop, and we're going to live stream it as well. And that's also on the website that I included, and you'll get an email about it. And it's also for lay people. It's not just for acupuncturists. And it's really about how you can do it for yourself. And there's 3 techniques I use for doing it yourself. So I'm going to go through all of them, because I find treating yourself is so different than treating other people. And you have to find a method that works for you, and not every method works for everyone. So I have 3 different methods, and between all of those, I think usually people are successful. It is one of the hardest things to do on yourself. That's why I needed a workshop to teach people.
Understandable. Well, you guys will all get an email 5 minutes after the conclusion of the webinar that will have access to that and that link so you can get the discount. And then Elise also wants to know, can you talk more about vibrating the point?
Yeah. I don't know whether she wants a needle or non-needle discussion, but I'll do the non-needle discussion. So you're basically, your finger is on the point, and you're vibrating so subtly. So it's almost as if a needle is inside and that's what's moving. So you can think of yourself as the needle. And so, like I said, there are some techniques where the movement's very slow. This isn't that. It's very short and fast. So I don't know what else to say about that, but that's a lot of the training I do with people who come and do treatments, and I observe them and I watch them and I help them learn that technique, because I do a lot of people come and shadow with and observe me doing these treatments who are acupuncturists, and then I also have them do them and I watch, and that's really the best way to learn it.
Right. And then since we use the AEPs to clear aggressive energy, how do you clear your, we already answered that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, talked about that. Next question is from Merritt. Is the follow-up treatment also 4 to 6 hours or typically shorter? And is it a new treatment or of a check-in and processing the first treatment?
Okay, so the follow-up treatment is usually an hour to an hour and a half. I would think if you're new to it, maybe even 2 hours, but an hour and a half would be a nice amount. And it's occasionally a carryover because you're not done from the previous day with something. That's the more that I've stopped trying to do other treatments on the same day, I'm not as confined by time on the first day. So the follow-up treatment gets us to be about the follow-up. And remember, the follow-up is be yourself, be your authentic self. So I like to do source points. I like to do clearing of AE or anything like that needs to be done, or heat, clearing of heat, but essentially really some spirit level points that are helping their true essence, the connection to their true essence happen. So it's not a check-in. It's
right.
really,
and then
it's really
Melanie wants to,
go ahead.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So Melanie would like to know, can we practice this and offer this to the public if we are not a Chinese medicine practitioner?
So this is something I have been really contemplating for a long time, because I have been teaching people who have a practice, but perhaps it's not acupuncture or Chinese medicine based. And because alchemy is sort of this really unusual subset of Chinese medicine, and it really is its own thing, I believe that if you have a practice that has some kind of spiritual base to it, maybe just a massage practice might be so physical that there's not a lot of ways to engage someone on the spirit level. That might not be that great a match, depending on you, because you might be doing the most spiritual massage practice ever. So no judgment, but I'm just saying that if you have a very physically based practice, this might be a leap both for you and your patients. But if you, for example, I work with a cranial sacral person, I'm working with, various types of people who are working a spiritual level with their clients. And I think for them that there are ways to at least do some of this work, if not all of it, knowing that they're not going to be able to do the Chinese medicine follow-up. So I would recommend that they have ways to support people who do struggle, continue to struggle after the treatments, which, like I said, some people are doing such intense work, maybe some very intense sexual abuse, that kind of thing. And they're going to need a lot more support than just one alchemy treatment. So you have to kind of look at what support do they have in their lives? Is it the right thing for you to insert yourself in that? And then, yeah, I do think it's possible. That's what I've concluded after all these years of teaching people.
All right, and then we have a few more questions left. Monica would like to know, do you offer student discounts for your workshops?
Yes, if someone wants to talk to me, it's not on the website, but just send me an email. We can talk about it. A lot of people from Jeffrey Yuen's School of Taoist Traditions come up, and we always give them a discount. So, just send us an email.
All right, and you'll see your emails right on the page right here, Leta@alchemyhealingcenter.com. So our last question for the night comes from Kevin. Could you speak to wandering the earth and getting a person back home?
Wandering.
Or speak to wandering. It says, could you speak to wandering and earth and getting the person back home?
Maybe that had to do with the traveling ghost. The
question was just asked a moment ago. So
maybe
Kevin,
they can clarify.
Clarify for us a little bit. Let's see if Kevin's still here. And if not, that's totally okay. I would like to thank you for all of your time tonight. Let me just
fantastic.
see. Looks like you might.
The wandering ghost.
Yes.
Well, home is with a capital H. So it's the white light. It's God. It's the divine. So with any Gui, they're them going home. They just don't have a way to get back to where they need to be. And so it's really, in terms of the work I do, there's levels of a practitioner. So as you evolve through doing this work, there are many ways to work with Gui, and just the simplest way is to think of sending them back to the white light. And that may take some sophistication on your part, but it's just something that, we can develop as we move along as a practitioner. It takes some time. I don't recommend doing Gui treatments on your first possession treatments. Find a nice emotional block to start out with. It's definitely a little easier.
All right, and we actually did get one more question in. This will officially be the last one of the night. Okay. Merritt would like to know, can a practitioner trained in TCM learn this, or do they need to learn the 5 elements first?
I absolutely think a practitioner who's doing TCM can learn this, especially if they're really interested in the spirit level of points and that kind of thing. The 5 elements for me, because I started out in the 5 elements, is just a wonderful sort of thing I put together with it. But alchemy itself is not based on the 5 elements. So I use it so much in helping people find their authenticity. So I do like to teach all my students about the elements who are TCM, because I think it can help you, but it's not a requirement at all, because alchemy is not based on the 5 elements. So I think that's it, right?
I think that's it. So thank you so much. This was amazing. Everyone enjoyed. I've seen the chats. The chat has been filled up with people just thanking us for this webinar tonight. Thank you to everyone who came tonight. We do have a webinar actually next Wednesday as well. It will be featuring Michelle Gellis on facial acupuncture. Stay tuned for registration. That'll be up soon. In about 5 minutes after we end, you will receive an email from us. So there will be a few links in there that can be discounts on Leta's upcoming workshops. Also a discount for some select products at lasaoms.com. So feel free to take a look at that once you get it. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening, Leta. You're amazing.
Thank you.
And
Jeff.
everyone, have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care. Good night.